Hey there, Reese here from CreatorConcepts. So in this video I wanted to show you what the cycle looks like for developing and iterating an MVP and the general steps and processes that we would recommend using to go from an initial idea through to prototyping, development, and then obviously evaluating if the product is successful based on a certain set of criteria. So if we jump straight in, I put together a really simple outline or kind of flow of what the MVP development cycle typically looks like. Now, there's going to be different ways to look at this, and depending on who you speak to and research you do, there'll be different cycles. But this is generally what we see at CreatorConcepts. We're an MVP development agency based in the UK. And what we typically see is that it starts off with idea generation. So this is where the founder or the business owner knows they have a problem that they want to solve, and they're coming up with ideas and different ways to actually solve that particular problem. So they're plotting the issue that they're facing, either in their business already or in something that they've noticed. Maybe there's a problem that they see day to day in their job, or taking the kids to school, whatever it may be, and they see something that they want to solve, and they start the idea generation process. This is where they map out potential solutions and fixes for that particular problem. Now, this can take anywhere from a couple of days to weeks, if not months, and lots of people actually get stuck at this stage, especially first-time founders. This process can even turn into years where they're sitting on an idea or ideas that they have and they don't actually take that first step. So the faster you can get over that hump of having an idea and then actually getting something or getting to the next step, the better. Then they typically move into concept development. So concept development is where we take that initial idea, we then start to put together a concept for the idea. That could be a wireframe, a black and white wireframe. It could be a high level design concept, or it could be a high fidelity design, all done in Figma, which is what we do, where you map out the screens of the app or the screens of the MVP or the piece of software, the different features, the pages, the flow, the kind of user experience, and you put together a concept. Once you get to that stage, it comes into, you've surpassed that initial barrier of idea generation, and you've entered the world of essentially working on the startup actively, and you have something to show people. And that's where you move into the testing phase. Now, the testing phase initially is going to be friends and family. It might be people that you know. In an ideal world, you'll be doing market testing from early on, but in most cases this doesn't happen. That's why we've mapped out two separate market testing and just general testing. The general testing, the first stage is, as I say, friends, family, trying to get kind of reassurance from people that are close to you that the idea is worth pursuing. This is actually a potentially problematic phase because you can get feedback that is supportive, but it may be supportive of a solution that isn't actually solving a real problem, because obviously friends and family want to give you that good feedback, they want to reassure you. So you do have to be very careful here. And on the other side of that coin, you may get negative feedback about something that actually has real legs to it. So we would always dissuade our clients from doing friends and family testing, but we do know it happens. It's a completely natural part of the process. But just be very careful with who you're getting that feedback from, who you're doing that testing with, because it may not always be accurate or accurately represent what the market wants. Once you get through testing, you then get into the commercialization stage, which is where you're taking the concept that you've put together, and then you're starting to try and commercialize it. So you're coming up with price points, you're coming up with subscription packages, you're coming up with offers that you might want to run around it. If it's a software, you might start to implement a free trial or come up with like a 7-day free trial or 30-day free trial, do some research around that, and really start to tackle the commercialization stage of building an MVP. This is really exciting. This is where it starts to feel like a real business or a real startup. Don't be tempted to underprice. A lot of people think that by giving away your MVP or giving away your product for free or next to nothing is a good way to get customers, and it can be. Lots of great startups and tech companies lead with a free offer. HubSpot, for example, Spotify, they all have free offerings with the goal to then ascend to a paid plan. But if you haven't got a lot of money to work with and you haven't raised funds and you can't necessarily sustain all the customer support overhead for free users, strongly consider going a paid route to start with and choosing a price point that you'll be motivated to speak to that customer. You'll be motivated to do any sales engagements and jump on calls with them in the early stages, because if they're paying you enough, or what feels like enough for you right now, that's a good incentive. If they're paying you a couple of dollars a month and you've got to have to sit on a Zoom call and explain how things work, you're just not going to have that same incentive. So make sure you're incentivized through that commercialization process from the very beginning. Then you graduate into market testing. So once you've got your concept, once you've tested it early stage, you've got the commercials aligned with what you'd like to charge, you then can start to test with the market. Now this is where you might do in a traditional sense focus groups or paid focus groups, paid surveys, things like that. But with an MVP, with an app, a piece of software, a SaaS, you're better off just setting up customer interviews with people who are in your ideal customer profile. So an ideal customer profile is a set of characteristics that define the type of person you want to work with. Are they male or female? Are they located in a particular jurisdiction? Do they do something for a job? Are they in a particular sector or market? Are they of a particular age? What kind of behaviours do they exhibit? And that will really help you hone in on, once you get that sorted, the right type of people to speak to for your market testing. Again, you don't want to be going and speaking to people of all different markets and different personalities trying to get feedback, because you'll get so much feedback that is completely irrelevant to the problem that you're trying to solve. So if you're picking a problem, you want to speak to people in that market who experience that problem on a day-to-day basis. Let's say you're working on a quote calculator for the construction industry for people to quote crane hire jobs. You don't want to be speaking to people who are labourers or people who are bricklayers. You want to be speaking to crane hire companies who hire out their cranes and do quotes and maybe experience that problem that you're trying to solve. That way the feedback you'll be getting is a lot more relevant, and you can actually base your development and any iterations of the product later on that feedback. And you also validate whether the problem is worth solving, because it may be that you're focusing on a problem that is too small for them to care about, and more importantly, too small for them to actually pay you to solve. So market testing is taking your concept and then testing it with your ideal market. Once that process is complete, you should then have more confidence with design and development. Now, this is where you take your concept and you improve it further to be a high fidelity design, i.e. what the real thing will look and feel like. And in the development phase, and that's something we can obviously do with our clients, but if you're building it yourself, you would obviously want to make sure that you're designing and developing in accordance with the outcomes and feedback that you got from the market testing phase. In terms of what platforms to use for development, there's plenty of tools out there now, no-code tools to build. I'm a big fan, and we use Bubble. We also use Base44, which is a vibe coding tool, although we know what we're doing with it, so it's not so much vibe coding, it more just speeds up the traditional development stack or the development process that we would use. So once you've built it, then you get to the stage of launching. This is where you push it live on the app stores, or you launch online and you let people know about it. Now, there's no reason to get hung up about a launch, because what people sometimes like to do is do a massive launch, try and tell everyone, get as many people on board as quickly as possible, but that's actually the wrong way of doing it. So with our clients, we give them a framework for a soft launch, which is where they pick a small cohort of their target market from the market testing phase, and they do a slow and scheduled rollout where they're only dealing with a couple of customers to start with, and they're adding a couple more in a cohort, and that way if there's any bugs or issues or things go wrong, they're not panicking, they're not anxious, because they're not having to speak to loads and loads of people at the same time and fix loads of problems at the same time. They can only speak to one or two people, fix those issues, and figure out what needs to come next in the iteration phase, by doing a slow and controlled rollout. And what you'll also find is if you put a load of money into a big launch, often people miss it, they're not interested. Lots of big startups report or say that in the early days when they launched, nobody cared and they had to launch again and again. And basically you can essentially keep launching until people take notice. So don't get too hung up on the launch. It's basically just taking the product and testing it with a few people, a few real customers, and getting their feedback and working out any bugs from there. Then you do what's called a post-launch evaluation. So this is where you evaluate if your initial assumptions that you had at the start of the project during idea generation, if those turn out to be true or false. So that could be the MVP that I've built and launched. Does it meet the criteria of solving the problem that I set out to solve in the concept development and the idea generation stage? If yes, then great. If no, then maybe you need to go back a few steps and speak to your market again, go back through the market testing phase to figure out what are we missing here? Have we missed anything? Did we interpret the feedback that we got wrong? Speak to more people. Maybe if you spoke to 10 people before, speak to 20 or 30. And then you'll know, as part of that evaluation process, what to do next. And from there you can iterate. So you can always iterate whether you've had a successful launch and the post-launch evaluation went well, or if it didn't go well, you always iterate. A product never stands still. It never just stays as it is. So with iteration, you're going back into that concept development stage a little bit, but instead of the whole concept, you're maybe coming up with new features and new angles to approach, new things that will make the process easier for your customers. And then you just want to go back through that cycle again of testing it with the market, figuring out if you want to commercialize it any differently. Maybe it's going to be an extra plan, a new pro plan that you introduce with new features and new power-ups. And then you just continually iterate and change the product and improve the product over time from there. And that's the iteration cycle. So really, it's a very straightforward process, but people skip from idea generation all the way through to basically launching something and skipping the market testing and the commercialization side, where they need to figure out the fundamentals of the business mechanics to make it work. Don't do that. I've made that mistake many times before. Many of our clients have. Now we coach clients to go from idea generation all through this process so that they check off each step that's required to build a successful product. So if you have any questions, please do reach out to me at reese@creatorconcepts.co.uk. Link and email will be in the description of this YouTube video. Feel free to share it and like and comment, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks.